Did you know that every day over 1,000 new apps are being released on App Store alone? How do you even try to make your app stand out with such aggressive competition? Apart from great functionality and straightforward UI, the next obvious answer is branding, which is going to be the topic of today's video. Hi and welcome back to this series where I'm talking about all things app design. My name is Daria, and for the past several months I have been designing a creativity app for artists called Sketch. In the previous 2 episodes I covered the topics of ideating and wireframing, so feel free to check them out if you missed them. You'll find all links under this video. Now, however, let's dive into app branding and everything that goes along with it. When hearing the word branding, we tend to immediately think about the product logo, which of course plays a very important role in it. However, branding as such is a much wider concept which has a lot to do with designing a unique and recognizable identity for your app. You can think of functionality as the body of the product and branding as something that gives it its soul. Of course, a mobile app is a very soulless thing at a first glance, being just a compilation of code lines. But it's our human factor, our human perception that allows us to interpret visual cues and attribute feelings and meaning to them. These can be colors, graphic elements, including the logo, the tone of voice in your marketing materials, your slogan, etc. As a product creator, it is your job to figure out what you want your app to be associated with, what you want users to feel when experiencing it, and what kind of message you want to communicate over. For example, with Sketch, I want to inspire people and light their creativity spark. I want Sketch to be associated with fun and resourcefulness and ideally excitement and joy of creating. And on top of everything else, I want these feelings and associations to be permanently anchored in users' minds, resurfacing every time they see the brand, strengthening the brand recognition and trust. So as a creator, where do you start? Here is a checklist with questions to ask yourself that will help you get a better idea of your brand image. The first question to answer is, what does my app do? Basically, what problem does your app solve? You can also help yourself by writing down the keywords that help to describe your app functionality. The second question is a very important one. Who is my target group? Or in other words, what kind of people am I trying to reach with my product? This provides you with demographic composition of your audience, such as age and gender, as well as specific features and interests that might be relevant to your product. Sketch, for example, is targeted at artists who actively use social media, which gives us an age group from around 18 to 35 years old. This information, among other things, can help you to determine the tone of voice to use in your communication with the users. For example, more versus less formal. The third question is, how does my app stand out? Or what is my unique selling proposition? For Sketch, it's a variety of tailored art content that changes daily, so users get suggested something new every single day. What this tells me is that when marketing the app, I need to try and emphasize this over everything else. The fourth question is, what are my values and key messages that I want to bring over to the users? This is also the kind of information you will try to repeatedly communicate in all of your marketing materials and in the app. For Sketch, I love to emphasize the power of the art community and supporting fellow artists, as well as that it can be really fun and easy to practice your art daily. And even the smallest amounts of effort accumulate to great results in the long run. The fifth question is, how do I want my app to be perceived? This includes what kind of feelings your app should evoke and any direct or indirect associations with your brand. Answering this question will help you a lot when designing a logo, because oftentimes creating an associative link to an object or perhaps an animal with qualities that you want your brand to be associated with already does a great job. And the last question is, what channels of communication do I want to use? This one is pretty straightforward and allows you to plan ahead what kind of promotional materials you might need in the future. Once you have these things figured out, it's time to move to actual branding. Starting off with the product name, I already talked about it in the first video, but to quickly sum it up, your app name should be memorable and closely associated with what your product does. Shorter names usually work better, and if you manage to fit an important keyword into your name, this will help you to optimize the search in App Store and Play Store later on. It goes without saying that you shouldn't pick a name that is same or similar to already existing ones, not only for intellectual property right infringement reasons, but also because it makes it harder for users to recognize and differentiate the brand. At the same time, as there are more and more apps appearing every day and progressively less free names left, you will need to get creative. Once you have picked your name and secured your domain and social media accounts, it's time to move on to the logo design. When we talk about app logo design, we talk about two things: a full-size logo that you can use on your website and in your promotional materials, and the app icon, which will show up on your user's home screen once they download the app. There are different types of logos, from text only to combinations of text and graphic elements. Depending on the variant you go for, you might want to make your app icon only contain the symbol from the logo, or only the first letter from the product name, for example, which is very common for apps. Regardless, you need to make sure that there is a clear link between the logo and the app icon. You have a lot of flexibility when it comes to logo design, but for app icons, there are several rules that you might want to follow. First of all, avoid using long words in the app icon, simply for the reason that they're not going to be legible. A good check to see if your icon is clean and recognizable is to see if you can still distinguish the motif when the app is grouped in a folder on your home screen. For the same reason, you shouldn't make your icon too detailed if it's some kind of graphic element. The best app icons are the simplest, which also makes it easier for the users to remember them. Checking how your app icon looks on the screen also allows you to compare it to other apps and see if yours stands out enough. You might also want to use colors that are not as common, but we'll talk more about colors later. For O-Sketch logo, I from the very beginning had an idea of using hand lettering in some form. I draw a lot in Procreate, and one of the brushes I really love is Nico Room. It has this rough marker effect with very powerful lines and abrupt edges. I thought that this kind of lines in combination with free-handed letters will give me exactly that feeling of fun and playfulness that I'm looking for. It also gives a reference to sketching in your notebook, which I thought plays well into the concept of the app. The thing about hand lettering is that I'm not exactly an expert in it. It took me a really long time to figure out the shapes, and I basically just repeated the same lines over and over again until I figured it out. I sketched out all letters in Procreate and then traced them with the pen tool in Adobe Illustrator, making slight adjustments here and there as I was putting everything together. Important to mention, since I planned on creating a little intro animation, I made each element to be animated, arranged on a different layer. Once you get to finalize your app icon, you need to make sure it complies with the respective guidelines from Google and Apple. There are templates you can download to make sure that your app icon is the right size. And there are also guidelines on all the different sizes and formats that you will need to provide. For example, when submitting the app icon to App Store, you will need to also provide versions for the spotlight search, settings, and notification. For Play Store, you will need to provide an adaptive icon with separate files for background and the main element. And if you want to support the theming, you will also need to make a monochrome version of your app icon. You will easily find all of these guidelines available online, so don't forget to check those out. Of course, already when designing the app logo and icon, you will need to start thinking about your app color palette. Just as graphic elements, colors can communicate emotions and are heavily used in all kinds of promotional materials to create a feeling and association about a product. One of the most used colors in apps is blue, the color of technology, trust, and peace. You will find it in many apps you use every day: Facebook, Telegram, Dropbox, even the App Store itself. Blue is not the only color that has associations linked to it. There's a whole color theory to help you out. For example, yellow is the color of hope and optimism, green is often linked to growth and freshness, and purple is often associated with royalty, mystery, and creativity. By analyzing your brand image, you can put together a color palette that is relevant for your exact case. How many colors should you choose? That's a whole different question. This depends a lot on your app design and its general feeling. For more corporate and formal apps, it's very common to use 1-2 colors along with a neutral color like white, gray, or black. For more playful apps, you can use as many colors as your soul desires as long as you avoid overloading the app. The visual weight of colors also plays an important role. You should differentiate between a primary color that has high brightness and saturation and a pale shade that serves as a background color or a secondary highlight. For O Sketch, I went with an extensive color palette to make it as fun as it can possibly get. The color I use as primary is actually black, since it's the only color that always provides higher contrast than whatever color from my color palette is currently present on the screen. Otherwise, as you can see here, I have 5 accent colors and 5 highlight colors. Accent colors in my case are shades with higher visual weight that I use to color cards and containers in the app. Highlight colors are most often used for text overlaying those containers. So for each accent color, I have a highlight color that goes well with it. The system also allowed me to design app themes, where by replacing an accent color with a different hue, I can match a new highlight color which will work equally well in all respective places in the app. You might be wondering how to pick colors that actually work well together. The short answer is that there is a lot of feeling and practice that goes into it. If you don't feel comfortable with colors, you can always use color palette generating services. One of my favorites is coolers.com. They have a great generator where you can save and export your created color palettes. Moving on to the next element of branding, typography. This topic can get really extensive since it's a science of its own. Just like any other part of branding, typography creates this subtle mood in the app and affects how we perceive the content. There are many types of fonts, each with their own unique set of traits, and picking one will depend a lot on your brand's personality. Go for a serif font if you want an old-fashioned, traditional, and reliable feel to your product. Sans serifs, on the other hand, are minimal, modern, and clean. Script fonts come across as unique and elegant, while display fonts are bold and attention-grabbing. For O Sketch, I went with Rubik and Sensation font families that I use for most text elements and headings, as well as a fun, rounded square font called Michroma, which stands out with its unique shape and adds a bit of variety to the app. I mostly used it for headings at the top of the screens. Fonts and their styling are a matter of personal preference, but also here there are rules and guidelines that you might want to follow. Generally, it's a good practice to use no more than 3 fonts in your app and choose fonts that do not clash against each other. Usually, if you find a font you like, you can search online for recommended pairings. The last big part of branding is graphic elements, and it's probably my favorite part, so I decided to make a whole other video about it. I will show you how I create my illustrations in Procreate and Adobe Illustrator, and all the different kinds of graphic materials that you might need before and after publishing the app. Consider subscribing so that you don't miss any updates, and if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments. I love reading your feedback and I'm always happy about your questions and suggestions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.